Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are talking about the Clone Wars Season 2, Episodes 15, 16, and 17. We're talking about senatorial politics and murder. We're talking about cat and mouse battles in space. And we're talking about 7 samurai on a foreign planet. All that and more after this commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm your host. Joining me, as always, for the Clone Wars is Riki and Sara Hayashi. How are you folks doing tonight?
Hello.
Speaking of cat and mouse, you may hear our cat.
Is your cat being rather playful tonight?
Gosh, she's in a mood. I don't know.
Sounds good. If you've ever wondered why every now and then you hear clanging sounds or banging while one of them is talking, so I can't edit it out, that's their cat making its presence known. We each have fans of both a 2-legged and a 4-legged variety. Or in my case, a 1-legged. Well, great. Glad to have you guys here. Looking forward to talking about these episodes. But I want to start by saying we had some technical problems here at Star Wars Universe Podcast. For a while, I've been asking folks to email in and was a little bummed that we weren't getting any emails. Turns out we were, but Google had lost them. And basically, they were supposed to be auto-forwarding to my main address. They were not doing so. So I went back and found, actually, some great emails. Some that are pretty recent, some that are from a while back. But I want to just take a moment and read those out, thank the people, and discuss them a bit. Because a lot of them are about the Clone Wars. Either what we have discussed directly or some of the newer seasons of Clone Wars, which, the new season of Clone Wars, I should say, which I haven't discussed with you guys, but I know all of us have watched. So, our first one comes from Matthew Roberts. Matthew writes, "Loving the podcast and the insights and thoughts about what is one of my favorite universes. I also love the last episode of the Clone Wars and the tension and parallels between Ahsoka and Maul. If you want some insight into what happens between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope to characters like Maul and Ahsoka, then you must watch the Rebels show. The first series is very much setting up that narrative with the new characters we meet and can feel like a kid's show, as mentioned in your podcast. However, once you get into the following seasons, you have encounters with the characters you want. I'm trying not to give any spoilers, but there are reunions with characters that are very poignant and heartbreaking at the same time. That's my recommendation, Matt." Matt, thanks so much. He's referencing more what we talked about at the end of the Clone Wars, but I think it's pretty relevant because, if I remember correctly, all three of us have now started watching Star Wars Rebels. Correct?
Well, we finished.
Oh, okay, awesome.
we just hyperspaced through that thing.
So clearly you think Matt's totally wrong and it's terrible, I'm sensing.
I think it's the best Star Wars cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's better than Clone Wars. We started watching Resistance and we kind of sputtered because it didn't grab us.
Yeah.
We'll finish it at some point.
Yeah, someone warned that Rebels didn't have a great first season, but I mean, I loved it start to finish. It felt the most Star Wars-y out of all the sort of spin-off shows we've watched.
Yeah. I definitely feel that way. You know, there's actual stormtroopers. There's no Roger nonsense. You're right. There's characters from Star Wars that feel like Star Wars. There's a character that appears in both it and Revenge of the Sith that feels much more accurate to his representation in the original movies, without going into who that is. Yeah, I agree with you all. I'm not as far along as you are. I got caught up in a couple other things, but I'm really enjoying it. I think its place in the continuity makes no sense whatsoever. But as the opening crawl of A New Hope with the words, the rebellion has just won its first victory, make less and less sense as we have more and more of these shows. But I'm definitely loving it, and I'm looking for. I'm hoping with you all, or maybe with someone else. I think once we finish Clone Wars, we'll definitely jump into a watch of Rebels and talking about that, because I think that's really rich environment and has a lot to offer in terms of discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so the next one is from Brendan Goss. Brendan writes, "Hey guys, love the show," and here he is specifically talking about something that we mentioned in the episode about the last episode of last season of Clone Wars. And you know what? This will have kind of spoilers, so I am actually going to hold off on this one as well, because I don't want to spoil people who have not yet seen the last episode of Star Wars. So of Clone Wars. So we'll hold off on that. There's a couple other people who wrote in who I've responded to, and we may get to read them on air at some point. Thank you all to everybody, though, and please keep writing in. Please keep letting us know what you think. Tell us when we're right, tell us when we're wrong, and we'll definitely want to read those on air and get back to you. So with that, let's dive into the episodes we have. And let us start with episode 15, Senate Murders. Senator Anaconda Farr, who folks may remember, we met him in season 1. He is from the same planet that Guido is from. I can't remember what the name of that planet is or the name of the people. Do you guys know? Rubia.
Rhodians.
Rhodian, thank you. Rhodians. And he was the one who Padme thinks of as an uncle. But when she got there, it turns out that he was betraying her because he was working for the Separatists. But that during the course of it, he realized the Separatists were not actually going to help his planet. They were going to bring him into the war. And he switched sides at the very end and helped Amidala. So he is poisoned. And Padme teams up with Bail Organa to unmask the culprit, who turns out to be a fellow senator. What do you guys think of this one?
I think it had probably the most boring intro crawl out of all of the Clone Wars. I just want to read a little snippet from it. This is Admiral Yularen, who does his like wartimey, old-timey voiceover. So in his like Dateline voice, he says, Senator Padme Amidala, recognizing that more troops will only prolong the fighting, works tirelessly with her allies to introduce a bill to cut down the military spending and stop the creation of more clone troopers. So you're like set up for, here's some galactic bureaucracy, which is just like dull. And I get that it's world building and to sort of flesh out how bills work in the Senate, but also like I don't want to watch space bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is what like it doesn't turn out to be that
but
huge.
they don't give us the bureaucracy.
No.
Yeah.
So it starts off with Amidala giving a speech in the Senate to like rally people to this cause, to this bill. Except that we don't get to see the speech. We get like the last 2 lines of her speech as she's finishing. And it's like, and that's why we need this bill to stop the war. And these are the moments where it would really help us to see her oratory.
Yeah.
Because supposedly she is a well-respected and rising senator, but yeah, we don't get to see why so much.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I love these bureaucracy episodes, but I understand they're not really what 8-year-olds want to tune in for, or many adults either. In the same way that I wanted 2 hours of diplomatic wrangling over the Sokovia Accords in Civil War. But I think you're right. It teases at world building, but it doesn't give us enough to grab onto, especially because a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. One of the things for me is I still don't quite understand exactly where Padme and Naboo stand in all of this. On the other side of this podcast, we just put up an episode about the movie Attack of the Clones, and we're talking about all the ways in which that movie doesn't make any sense. But one of the points that I made is, listen, if you want to think that there's actual planets that genuinely believe the Republic is no longer useful and they want to separate away from it, wouldn't the planet that got invaded and then the Republic was powerless to intervene be like one of the first in line to believe in the Separatist cause? I can understand why they didn't write it that way, but I'm continually not feeling like I have any understanding what Padme and Naboo's motivations are in all this, other than whatever the plot needs for that episode.
I think there's like an interesting connection between Palpatine and Padme. Like, I don't know if Palpatine at this point in the Clone Wars like knows that she and Anakin are married, and he's got such a close relationship with Anakin that maybe there's some like she is willing to give him more of the benefit of the doubt than he deserves, or sort of sees him as sort of a pseudo father figure.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is also from Naboo, so he's a mentor, I guess.
Yeah. Certainly, I think he senses Anakin's strong feelings about her. In Attack of the Clones, it does seem like he's the one to push for... Yeah, actually, this is true. Palpatine is very insistent that Padme needs the protection of a Jedi. So I think he's definitely trying to move the chess pieces of putting Anakin and Padme closer together.
Yeah. So in the Phantom Menace, he's actually the senator from Naboo at the time, because she's the
queen,
elected queen.
Yeah.
Which doesn't, I don't know, but okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
So she takes his seat in the Senate when he becomes chancellor, or a little after.
And he uses the incident to become chancellor by saying, "Look, like the Republic can't save my planet. Like, what are you gonna do? You're weak."
Yeah.
So he gets the chancellor at the time, Valorum. They do a vote of no confidence.
Right.
And then he's surprised that they elect him to be chancellor.
Gosh, I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. I'll do my best.
I will say I did like, we've talked a lot about how we wish we knew more about what the Separatists want and where everybody falls in this. They've hinted at the idea that part of what's driving this war is money and the people who are profiting off of it. Right. And I did like that. I feel like we get a lot more of that. And we've talked before about how this came out right around the time that the critique of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were really heating up, the late around like 2008, 2009, 2010. And I think that this is very intentionally, like, that was around the time that people were talking about Halliburton and oil companies profiting all, and the military companies profiting all this. And here we have, all this discussion about it's the people who make the clones, it's the people who make the weapons who want to keep the war going. And I really liked her perspective of, we can't afford this, both in terms of the lives being lost and the money being spent, and that we should seek diplomacy. It just felt kind of like it was a drop in a different ocean, because we have not had any discussion about what the Separatists would want diplomatically or what peace would look like. So it felt out of place, but I did really like that part.
I would have liked a little more whipping. This is all about getting votes for the bill. There was some talk of that, but we never actually see like a senator on the fence being negotiated with and talked to about like why they should support the bill.
Yeah, and then Padme like kind of gives up and says like the best way to support this issue is find out who murdered Ono. I keep wanting to call him Ono, but it's Ono. And just like completely abandons it and goes off on her like private detective mission, and then while she's doing that, they just vote without her.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay.
Yeah, a lot of it seems so weird to me, especially because, and we later find out he was not killed by the people who are against the bill he was pushing. But I have to say, like, knowing what I do about politics, and I think we've seen this when, people have been killed before, if a U.S. senator from whatever party was pushing a bill that was maybe going to pass, but maybe not, and then got killed because of the bill, that bill passes in a landslide. I mean, like, there's no better way to gather a martyr vote than something like that. So I thought that was also kind of a little bit of a childish view of politics.
And also, he's poisoned by like his underling, basically, because she's upset about the betraying he did on Rhodia is the planet's name, right? Yeah.
Rhodia, yeah.
Rhodia. And like, so it just seems like I don't even know if she's concerned about the bill. Like, she's part of the group of senators who are like trying to get it passed, but it seems like that may have just been so she could get close enough to Ono.
But she claims that her motivation to murder him was that he brought war to my planet.
Yeah.
So shouldn't you support
his not
the anti-war bill?
Yeah. One of the comments that we've made on those rewatches of the movies, but I think is also applicable here, is that I think one of the biggest problems of the prequel movies and the TV show The Clone Wars is you're trying to tell stories that are much more subtle, much more nuanced, and really much more mature than anything that happened in the original Star Wars movies, and that just doesn't really fit for a kids show or for kids movies. And I mean, honestly, I watch this and I think I would love some like CW style or like Netflix style TV show that was just all about like senatorial wrangling and political intrigue and who's sleeping with who among the senatorial aides of the Senate during the Republic during the Clone Wars. You know, like I would love that show. And I think I both love this episode and I'm so frustrated by it because it gives us just the teeniest bit of it, but it also doesn't make, we don't have the larger picture to understand how it makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think, so I'm just genuinely not a fan of the governmental structures of fictional worlds, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, I feel like I can deal with just some hand waving and be like, it works, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But I think an example is, so Riki and I just recently watched the Gundam prequel miniseries.
Okay.
And I watched Gundam Wing way back in the day, and those shows both deal so much with like politics and like the politics of basically two warring factions of Earth, and it's but it's done in like an intriguing way. They're like, it's definitely not a kids show, or if it is, it's like very violent for a kids show,
right?
Especially the miniseries. I think Gundam Wing was more aimed towards kids, but there was still like a lot of political nuance. And I feel like it just, like what you're saying, Matthew, they gave a taste, but just like didn't go in far enough. They like sort of landed in this weird middle ground where it was just kind of like, here's some politics stuff. Yeah. But also murder.
And I like it, but I wish it had gone further. What did you think of the investigator?
Is he Columbo? Is he Space Columbo?
I think he's supposed to be Space Columbo.
He's not quite that bad.
But more of he's played as kind of a little bit of a doddering idiot and very, very pretentious. I loved him, though. I just thought he was such a nice breath of, like, he wasn't a Jedi, he wasn't part of the Senate, he was just sort of like this is my job on Coruscant, and I'm not part of all these bigger stories, I just investigate killings. And I just thought it was a nice bit of world building and a really quirky, fun character.
Yeah.
And he was right, too. Yeah. When he's like, leave the inspecting to me and you go do the senating. Yeah. Which they should have. The part of this episode where Padme and Bail Organa go to the docks to investigate was so bad. Like, that they shouldn't have done that.
Well, like, even previous to all of that. So the inspector comes in and interviews the senators, and like you said, Matthew, he's kind of bumbling and pretentious, and this upsets Padme, who's like basically uncle has just been murdered. And so then he's like, don't go investigate this on your own, I've got this. And the first thing she does is like, well, gonna go investigate this on my own. Mm-hmm. And they go into some other senators who they think are initially responsible, and they're the ones who tell them to go check out the docks. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. And by going on this wild goose chase, the vote happens in the Senate without them and doesn't pass.
Yeah. It's Padme especially, but a lot of them, like, they do what's required of the plot without it being like, who is this character and what do we expect of her? Mm-hmm. So I think that's
and she's probably been hanging out with Anakin too much. Yeah, because he's all about the like, I'm just gonna do it. Also action.
Just kind of looking over to see if there's any other little things I wanted to mention before we move on. I will say it. At first, when the Kaminoan senator appeared, I was thinking like, wait, this planet's way out on the outer rim and no one heard about it 3 years ago. How in the world does it have a senator? And I appreciate that they named that. And they specifically said, like, they got rushed into the Senate because of the clone stuff. So I was at least happy. Like, okay, like, you acknowledge that's a problem, and it actually is a plot point itself.
Someone writing saw the plot hole and quickly, like, shoveled it in.
Yeah. Anything else on this episode?
No.
Cool.
There was something, but I totally forget. Something that irritated me. And I can't remember it anymore, so clearly it wasn't that important.
I think Mon Mothma's too old in this episode.
This episode? It could be.
Is that who that woman was supposed to be? She was supposed to be Mon Mothma?
Yeah. Or as I call her, Mon Martha.
Why'd you say that name? No, because I believe she's supposed to be a teenager at this point. And is But who knows? Like, she's Chandrilian,
Yeah.
so maybe they
could age
differently.
differently. Who knows? I mean, certainly, like I said, I looked at the math once you understand what's happening in the Clone Wars movies and all that, and the official dates that have been given. Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope is 55.
But again, he's been
had a lot
living
of
in a
stress.
desert.
He's lived in a desert. He's had some stressful situations. Not enough animals to ride.
Yeah, clearly that's the problem.
He has lots of animals to ride.
All right, so let's talk about the next episode. And I would just say about that one, I think I did like it quite a bit more than you guys, but there's definitely a lot of hilarious problems.
I liked it.
Oh.
It was just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wanted different stuff. I wanted less of the Nancy Drew and more of the Senate politics.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely with you on that one.
Called Padme Nancy Drew while we were watching it.
That's fitting.
The thing that also kind of doesn't really like super bug me, but is weird about this episode is that like it's not this episode and the next episode aren't in chronological order in season 2.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's just like kind of a weird out of nowhere episode to begin with. And it's like also someone got murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so badly out of order.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next episode then.
Yeah.
And talk about that.
Yeah. All right. So Cat and Mouse, a highly seasoned separatist strategist, stands between the Republic fleet and beleaguered Republic forces on Christophsis. Anakin finds himself in command of an advanced prototype stealth ship with orders to ferry supplies to the weary troops on the planet below. Will he obey orders or use the stealth ship to launch a sneak attack on the separatist blockade? That's not a question. Clearly, he's not going to follow orders, which raises its own questions.
So the beleaguered Republic forces are led by Bail Organa, who's like, if you're just watching these episodes, like somehow magically he's been transported to this planet under siege.
He has no military experience that we know of. I mean, we're later told that his planet Alderaan is a completely peaceful planet. And we just saw him being pretty against the war. So what he's doing there, I have no idea whatsoever.
Yeah, it's super strange for him to like teleport into the like middle of nowhere into a war. But so Cat and Mouse, this episode, chronologically is the very first episode of Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But it's happening in like the middle of season 2. And they never explain explicitly, like, P.S. this takes place a long time ago. Not even a long time ago, but a while ago.
Mm.
Wait, how could this be the first episode of the TV show? Because what's his name, General Thrush or Admiral Thrush?
Admiral Trench.
Trench. Mr. Bug General. We've talked about him already because he appears in a later episode, and he certainly seems to die in this one.
He certainly does, but if you remember him in that later episode, he comes back with like heavy cybernetic components.
Oh, that makes so much more sense. Okay.
Yeah. He's probably one of my favorite characters.
No. Just no.
Riki doesn't like him because he's a spider. He's got a bit of arachnophobia.
Boo spiders.
I think he's great.
There's a weird clicking sound.
I love this weird clicking sound.
Yeah, I know. Because while we're watching the episode, you start clicking right next to me.
That's hilarious.
Ugh.
Yeah. Once again, we have some things about this episode that I quite like. A lot that makes no sense. I was really, Sarah, thinking about what you had said about the why is the fighting in space completely two-dimensional? Because it's literally, I mean, it's not even that it's two-dimensional. It's like the ships are literally just like holding their place in space, which is physically impossible because everything rotates in space. And just shooting at each other with like no strategy or like our ships moving straight ahead. It's funny. Yeah. There's a game now that's out, Star Wars Armada, which allows you to do like pretty intense, interesting like starship battling and like maneuver and stuff. And they do none of that in the show.
Yeah, and when we were watching it, Riki even mentioned like, why don't starships just have like engines on both sides, so that because there's a point where they have to turn around and the ships physically like move in a circle.
They turn around like ships on the ocean would.
Yeah.
Meaning they move forward and slowly like do this arc.
Mm-hmm.
Which you just don't need to do in space and exposes you to a massive amount of broadside fire.
Yeah. Either like do a somersault and go the opposite direction. Yeah. Or like stick some engines on the front of your ship as well and then just like turn those ones on and zoom off because you don't have like momentum. that
Right.
you really need to worry about. Like, or there's not really like friction or anything like that. Anyway, yeah, it's just it's weird, and I think you just really have to suspend your disbelief
Yeah.
about this being space and not water.
I think this is
So-
definitely my least favorite episode of the three, and it's part because just the whole thing is supposed to, like, the theme of the episode is like battle strategy, and none of the strategy that they use makes any sense.
Yeah.
As I have mentioned in the past, I have been watching way too many YouTube videos about Star Wars to just like get additional information. And I guess the canon explanation for why do the starships always like show up on the same plane, especially like in terms of hyperspace travel, right?
Yep.
And these blockades of planets, like how does a blockade work? The reason given is that there are hyperspace lanes through space, meaning you can't just jump to hyperspace from anywhere to anywhere. And you know, like in the stories, they often talk about like calculating the hyperspace routes, right, before they can make a jump, because it's dangerous. Like you don't want to hyperspace through a star, because that'll mess you up.
But wouldn't your gravity thing pull you out because space,
Well, yeah.
hyperspace? Okay,
Yeah.
because you would just be pulled out, not because you would go through the star. Okay, I got you.
So there are established hyperspace lanes that are known to be safe or like intentionally kept clear of objects, and a lot of the battle, like coming out of hyperspace, happens like at the exits of those lanes, basically.
But what's keeping them on the same like plane? Like I get what's putting them out toward each other, but like why are they both right side up to each other?
Because it's prettier.
Yeah.
Look, the Empire tried. They made the Death Star, which makes a lot more sense,
Just
right?
being
As a
round.
sphere,
Yeah.
just like the Borg.
It's so silly. I'll just say two other things just on the dumb strategy. One, we have seen consistently before other ships fire torpedoes of some kind or another without having to lower their shields. But even if that's a requirement, I can understand, and like often happens like in Star Trek or something like that, of you lower your ships for 5 seconds in order to fire, and so you're vulnerable. I don't think I would ever fire a weapon in the middle of a big space battle if it meant taking my shields down for like 30 to 60 seconds.
Right, because they also say we can't put the shields back up because they're recharging.
Yeah, which like what?
Why would they need to recharge? when
Yeah.
you turn them off.
Also, I know that it's, probably just a thing people think about, and maybe I'm sure it didn't even come from this, but it's the first reference I got. The move that Anakin pulls of get the torpedo to follow you and then fly right at the other ship and then fly right over it so that drive right over it so that the torpedo hits the people that fired it. Straight out of the end of the movie Hunt for Red October. It's 100% the exact same scene with like some of the same shots.
Yeah. Well, this was like very submarine movie-ish anyway, like right down to the pinging sound.
Oh yeah,
their
that's true.
Space Dar.
That makes me at least feel a little better that maybe this was an intentional reference to Hunt for Red October.
Yeah.
So okay.
Or just submarine movies.
Yeah, I feel at least a little better about that, but still a little annoyed.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think they even dim the lights on the ship when they cloak.
Yeah, they
Which-
do
why
say
would
like
you need to-
turn off everything, we'll just drift, which is
Why would you need
a
to
submarine
do that?
tactic. So, now here's my question for you: if you're a Jedi Admiral, you're sort of overall in charge of something. You have this special prototype new ship that is designed specifically to do primarily defensive things and like to run supplies. And especially right now, you need it to do a supply run and not to go on the offensive. Let's decide what general to put in charge of it for its first mission.
Ooh, the one who always disobeys orders and immediately goes and attacks anything in sight.
Yeah,
Did I get it right?
Where's Anakin on that list for you? Because he's pretty low on mine.
Because even the clone was like, yeah, well, when you're with General Skywalker.
Yeah, he's clearly got a reputation. Even this being chronologically first, so there's no like maybe they didn't realize he would do this. But yeah, wow, Anakin.
Yeah. It's
Such bad choices.
It also, I brought this up earlier, but it reminds me again of the fact that it seems like there is absolutely no chain of command. Because, like, I mean, Riki, tell me if I'm wrong here, but, like, you know, SCG is hardly the military. You guys don't have, like, but, you know, like, well, okay, maybe it is not. But, like, you know, if you give a judge a particular, like, hey, I need you to go and do this, and the judge goes and does the exact other thing, are you going to say, like, oh, well, that's just Matthew being Matthew, that's too bad, but that's what he does? I'm guessing that I'd get pulled off the floor pretty quick and told, like, you don't do that, and maybe we're not going to have you judging anymore for a little while. Am I wrong there?
I mean, it depends on what you've done.
Right.
And how... There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, and I feel like you're not... I mean, I could be wrong about this, but you're not prophesized as, like, the chosen one.
Well, something I haven't told you folks yet. But
Once again,
But yeah, that's my point, is I feel like in any kind of system normally, there's an understanding there's some kind of chain of command. And Anakin just blows through it constantly.
Yeah. And I do... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I do like how in later episodes we see Yularen just being, like, done with Anakin. Is it Yularen? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who's just, like, over it. Mm-hmm. Is sick of this guy, always disobeying orders. So I appreciate that, like, it's not just like, oh, Annie, and then he's right back at it again. But yeah, he does seem to get away with a phenomenal amount.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. I don't think I've got anything much more to say about this episode. It definitely was not my favorite. Anything else?
I'll say, from the tech side of things, they should not have done this. You should never introduce cloaking technology, and especially mention that there are other ships that can cloak.
Right.
Because they do mention that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, then you always have this question of, why don't you use a cloaked ship for this secret mission? And Star Trek has always had this problem, right? Of like, why can the Romulans and the Klingons have cloak and the Federation can't? And they had to invent this whole plot device of this treaty. And then you're questioning, like, how bad are the Federation diplomats that they would sign this treaty to, like, never use this very useful technology?
See, I was going to say, I actually think of Star Wars as a much better example of what this could be, because at least there, they do acknowledge there's a specific reason why it can't be used. And maybe it's not the best or smartest reason, but at least they name it in a way that, as you said, like here, they don't at all. It's just, yep, we used it 20 years ago, but for some reason, the movies that are made that are set chronologically 20 years later never use this technology.
Yeah, I agree. Or if it had something like, oh wow, the cloaking device blew up. Like, it always fails really badly. This sucked. We're never using it again. But yeah, I mean, I agree that I like Star Trek that they even, like, gave an attempt at an explanation, whereas this is just like cloaking devices. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that in the novels, Timothy Zahn's novel, The Last Command, I think it was, the third one in the Thrawn trilogy, they use cloaking technology and explain their lack of use in the galaxy this way, in that sensors cannot sense anything through a cloaking field.
Right. So you're kind of flying blind if you're in a cloak.
Right, meaning that the ship itself can't sense anything beyond. Right.
And part of the point...
in this episode, they showed them using their little, like, radar.
Yeah, because that's Legends.
Yeah.
The novels are Legends. So that's not the current definition of cloaking technology. But I'm saying he had a very innovative, I thought, explanation for why it wasn't used. Because it's just dangerous.
Well, and especially because then he goes into a much better explanation of, so with a very powerful Jedi, but also one who's comfortable literally just like mind controlling the people who fly the ship, then at least, he can be their eyes for them, but or he or she could be their eyes, they could be their eyes for them. But yeah, it doesn't make sense otherwise. All right, so let's move on to the next episode, which I think we're going to have some pretty positive things to say about, if I remember. And this is Bounty Hunters, number 17. When Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan crash on the lush rainforest planet of Felucia, which I think we'll definitely talk about that name in a moment, they decide to help 4 bounty hunters protect local farmers from pirates intent on stealing their valuable crops. Obi-Wan and Anakin soon find out that the pirates are led by the duo's old foe, Hondo.
Yes.
So, let's see. We've got 4 farmers. And then we add...
4 bounty hunters.
Oh, sorry, 4 bounty hunters. And then we add 3 Jedi. So we've got
That's 8.
7. I feel like there's some kind of reference that's being done with this episode. Riki,
this episode is also dedicated to Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah. So
I mean,
what's this all about?
Well, what we're talking about is the movie Seven Samurai, which was directed by Japan's greatest movie director, Akira Kurosawa. Who did other things you may have heard of, like Ran, Hidden Fortress, and Rashomon is a very famous one that people study in film school.
I will say that a couple of diehard Ghibli fans are already writing very angry emails to you, but yes, go on.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, he's old, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Orson Welles has kind of like faded into memory. But people who study film are like, oh yeah, Orson Welles. Whereas we're like, I'm never going to watch these movies.
His version of some, like, where he takes Shakespearean stories and puts them into, like, samurai culture are just phenomenal. But anyway, go on.
And so the Seven Samurai itself is probably, like, in Western culture, his most famous movie. And in fact has been copied multiple times. You may be familiar with The Magnificent Seven, where instead of samurai, it's cowboys, right?
Or my favorite,
there you go.
Pixar's A Bug's Life, where it's bugs instead of samurai.
And so now we have this in Star Wars. And Matthew, you also reviewed the episode of The Mandalorian.
Yep.
That is based on,
which is also plot. The same story. And we talked about how it was very reminiscent of a lot of cowboy movie tropes. Which I think it is a trope that existed somewhat independently of this, but there's the cowboy movie Magnificent Seven, as you pointed out, is very much based on this one and this coming first. So, but yeah, there's a Mandalorian episode. There's also pretty much the exact same story, which I just think is fantastic.
And I mean, I think there's a reason it gets like remade and repeated so often. It's a really great, really compelling story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got, like, the people who are in need, the kind of grizzled veterans who don't want to necessarily fight for them, but eventually get pulled around. There's always the element of, we're outnumbered, we're outgunned, so we have to teach the locals how to fight themselves, and they don't want to fight.
Against, like, the bigger enemy who's just taking advantage of these, like, underprivileged farmers usually, but
I know that in both this version and the Mandalorian version, a big part of it is that the other side has one central piece of tech. In this, it's a tank, and the other one, it's an AT-ST walker. Is that original to the Is there something about that in the Seven Samurai, or is that just something that's put in once they become science fiction stories?
No, I mean there was no big tech like vehicle. Right. I think the bandits in the Seven Samurai just had like overwhelming numbers.
Right. And just kind of a knowledge of fighting that the farms people themselves don't have.
It's weird that you bring that up, Matthew, because in A Bug's Life, the one that I'm most familiar with, they also have like a piece of ingenious tech, which is this like bird robot that they made. It's not really a robot. It's like a bird model.
The ants use that.
Yes.
So it's
sorry. Backwards. Yeah.
Well, and I will say that one of the I think kind of as part, this might be somewhat unintentional, but I think that there may be a connection here. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a Western-made show, but it is very much based on Asian interpretations of Asian culture and Asian ideas, and done with an awful lot of sensitivity. And one of the major actors from that is also a voice actor in this, which I could be coincidental, but I think was probably not, because he has an accent that I think is at least sounded at least a little bit Japanese inspired to me. Not the scared farmer, but the I think his name is Chassis. He's one of the other leaders of the farmers, but he's a little bit more sort of willing to go to fight.
So it's been a long time since I watched The Seven Samurai. but now that you mention the thing about the tech, I think it's possible that the bandits have like rifles.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and these people have like bows and arrows and swords and stuff. Yeah, that would make sense.
So it's not like a big vehicle, but I do believe they may have had a technological advantage in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So yeah, what would you like, getting to this episode specifically, what's your take on this particular interpretation of that great story?
Well, I like it, obviously. I loved it? I don't know. It's always great to have Hondo as well. He's just a delightful character and is voiced well in a way that he's clearly the villain, but it is still likable Hondo, right?
Yeah, Hondo's great. If I didn't see that, like, Akira Kurosawa dedication at the beginning of the episode, and they didn't explicitly say, like, well, now there's 7 of us, I don't know if I would have been as enamored with this episode. Because it does feel a little bit out of place in the greater Clone Wars arc, right? Where they just kind of get they don't get like abandoned on this planet. Why are they on this planet?
They crash.
They get shot down. Yeah.
Okay.
They're looking for the hospital, the only hospital in the sector.
Yeah, just build another hospital. But they're there, and it's similar to another episode from season 1 where they're abandoned on a planet and then have to help the native tribes there.
Right, who are pacifists in that episode.
There. Yeah, who are pacifists. And, I mean, Obi-Wan is bringing up the point of, like, we can't fight this battle for you because we're Jedi and we have to stay impartial. Isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I'm shaking my head at the policy.
Okay, not at me being incorrect. Okay. And then they sort of get around it with this, well, we're not going to fight, but we can teach you how to fight.
Yeah, because you have to have the classic scene of the sticks, like the farmers holding the sticks and like, ha! 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 And doing like 3 very bad strikes all in unison.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the trope.
Yep.
And even, oh man, when the farmers are like, we don't have weapons, and Anakin like grabs one of their sticks and just like,
oh yeah, starts spinning it.
Yeah, and he's like, this'll work, and it's like, you're a Jedi, sir.
Well, but
it might work for you.
But I think that is part of what I like about it is a, a lot of the times we see just, the Jedi come in and save everything. And it's one interesting note, the episode about senatorial murder, I'm pretty sure a Jedi never appears anywhere in that episode.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly no lightsabers ever used or Jedi powers. But because I do sometimes get frustrated by stories that are just about, like, great men of history and the 2 Jedi who can fix everything. I really do like the more of the, like, no, we need, like, the common people to rise up. We need it to be a more broad-based, revolution, or not a revolution, it's a fighting back. But, not just, like, I mean, on the one hand, from everything we've seen, when the Jedi say we can't save you by ourselves, I don't really believe them. But also I feel like it's a nice story to think that they can't unless they have to, get involved. But especially actually even because of what Obi-Wan says, where he says, like, if we fight this war for you now, then you'll still be just as defenseless when someone else comes along. And so it's the, like, you don't give a man a fish, you teach him how to fish. And instead of, like, killing the person's enemies for them, you teach them how to kill their enemies themselves, is a little bit more of a dark twist on that story, but I do kind of like it.
Yeah, and I think, like, I agree that I definitely think the Jedi could handle this totally on their own. Mm-hmm. But yeah, their like weird moral code is what's preventing them, and also the teach them to fish. And is it okay? They don't agree to do it until they see that it's Hondo. It's kind of also a funny thing, right? Because they're just like, nah, we can't do this. It goes against our code. Pirates are bad, but, like, sorry. And then Hondo shows up and, like, welcome, my friends, and just, like, is the best.
Yeah.
And then they're like, we will teach you how to fight this guy.
Which is a little funny because they're like, if it was Cad Bane, who's also awesome, but Cad Bane is just, like, I hate you, you hate me, we're going to fight. Hondo at this point feels more like frenemies with the Jedi. Like,
oh yeah.
And again, I'll say like other shows later in the seasons get into this, as well as some other pieces of fiction in the Star Wars universe. But like Hondo to me more is kind of like an eye rolly, like, all right, let's go capture him and smack him around until he learns to do what we always want him to do. But the idea of like, nope, Hondo's there, we have to go to war, didn't quite head up to me.
I don't even know if it's like have to go to war. It's just like this guy annoys me.
Yeah.
And like
he tried to negotiate.
Yeah, he tried to be like, listen, I'll just give you some Republic credits, and then you can go, and it's fine. Like leave these nice people alone. Mm-hmm. And Hondo was like, no deal.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I definitely really like this episode. I like the callback. I like the kind of day in the life story. And I really like that this is something that has absolutely nothing to do with the Clone Wars. Instead, it feels like it's kind of the similar to what we've seen in a couple of their episodes, but the idea of that because the Republic is so busy fighting the Clone Wars, that a lot of these like little skirmishes that often the Jedi would be able to come and help aren't getting taken care of. And it kind of goes more to the idea of that, like, the Republic is failing and that they're not taking care of things. And also it's just like an interesting story that is not directly relevant to what's Count Dooku doing and Grievous, and all those kind of things.
Sheev.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will also say, I hadn't even realized this until I said it, but 3 things that don't appear in any of the 3 episodes we just saw. Dooku never appears. Grievous never appears. And the 2 words that are never uttered in any of these 3 episodes, Roger, Roger.
False.
Really?
There is, in Cat and Mouse, Trench orders the droids to do something, and they go, Roger, Roger, and instantly, like, bump into each other.
Yeah, it was so
and, like,
bad.
pratfall.
So
you must have blocked that from your memory.
I did. So we're most of the way there. We got like 90%, droid free.
Yeah, it was like a throwaway gag with the droids, but there wasn't like massive droid bumbling throughout. Yeah.
They're standing on the bridge of a starship and just like turn right into each other.
Yeah, it was...
Who programmed these things?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were interesting episodes. I really, really like this episode. I think it's fun. I don't know if I would like it as much if I didn't like the Seven Samurai connection, but I mean, I do. So,
I would, and especially like I wish we would see more of these bounty hunters.
Mm-hmm.
So the only one that I recall seeing in future episodes is Embo, the hat guy, who I think shows up on Cad Bane's crew at some point, or maybe one of the other bounty hunters.
There's like there's an episode that involves a whole bunch of bounty hunters later down the line, and he's one of those.
And he throws his hat around, so it's kind of a callback to Odd Job from Bond.
Oh, that's good reference. Yeah, I mean, and we're also like, this is the season called Rise of the Bounty Hunters, and out of, I think we're on episode 17, and I think we've had 3 episodes that focus on bounty hunters, maybe more because the Mandalorian plot, but certainly it's more seemed like the season is like a light dusting of bounty hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we get more bounty hunters later, right?
Mm-hmm.
But especially their leader in this episode. She seemed like a really interesting character who has more morals than your average bounty hunter.
Right.
Yeah, and she's the same species as Maul.
Oh.
Right?
Are they? I don't think so.
No?
I think they are
the
different spiky...
different spiky face people?
Yeah, especially because Maul... We'll get more into it, but there's a weird breakdown of gender of what people look like on Maul's planet that we'll get down to.
She's a Zabrak, born on...
Maybe she is.
Iridonia? Is Maul Zabrak?
Yeah.
So...
I believe so.
But not born on Dathomir. Born on a different place.
Right.
She was born on Iridonia. Okay, yeah, and Dathomir has strange things of ruin.
So I made brief reference to the name of the planet. I'm curious if you guys also caught this, or if you think I'm reading too much into it. We've already discussed the idea that in a lot of ways, a lot of these episodes are referencing what was happening in America at the time, with all the concerns about the Iraq War and finances and lost lives and whether the war was worth it. And now they go to a planet called Fallujah, which I can't hear without immediately thinking of the Iraqi city of Fallujah, where so much of the guerrilla violence and fighting and all that kind of thing happened. Is that a reference you caught? Do you think it's just completely coincidental and I'm reading too much into it? Do you think it's intentional?
No, I mean, I instantly thought of that. I was also like listening to an NPR story about a musical called Fallujah that had just come out.
Oh.
Yeah. Which, I mean, just came out. This is probably several months ago now. And yeah, even when I watched it again, I was like, wait, did they just straight up call the planet the name of the city and then had to like look it up, and they're spelled differently,
right,
and pronounced slightly differently? But yeah, but beyond the sound of the name, I don't really like see many more connections other than, like you were saying, Matthew, in the sort of broad connecting of Clone Wars to
right,
the Middle East incidents, aggression. I don't know. Is there like a nomenclature for calling, like, is it just the Iraqi War?
I guess the Iraq War, the Iraq battles of the I think the war in Iraq is part of the war on terror.
Wars of American imperialism.
Yeah, that too. And certainly, I mean, my memory is vague. I wasn't studying it deeply, but my memory is that Fallujah was one of the places where there were a lot of sort of little local tensions between different groups, like that had more to do with like city politics than the big and some of it was kind of the larger overall narratives, but that a lot of it was also just like small rivalries within the city, but that all then got caught up in the larger narratives of the Shia and Sunni, and the U.S. backed, and who's favoring the U.S. and who's not, and Iraq and Iran and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it seemed an interesting reference, but a like odd to make that specific a reference, but then not make it more explicit. I thought was odd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you explaining that, I mean, like, I definitely see the ties of like the small interpersonal battles, but yeah, I agree. It seems odd.
Yeah. Definitely.
Riki, did you?
I don't think there's enough connection. It's, I guess I would probably guess that it was just like something. Oh, we need a name for a planet, and it was in the news, and they just changed it a little.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. And they already had a like. It might even be so much as like we want to have references to Iraq from time to time, but we're not going deeper than that. I think it's certainly possible.
Maybe.
And so like regarding the timeline, was Clone Wars being made during the Iraq War, or was this afterwards? Because it could be that they just like didn't have enough information to tie in. Right.
So the Iraq War started in, I believe, 2003, and this was made in 2009. 2009 or 2010, but I believe 2009. And so by that point, Obama had taken over, and Obama was starting to kind of draw down and pull us back. But this was not very long after the Bush's surge. So yes, I mean, so we were still pretty involved in fighting in Iraq, and certainly we were only, maybe 2 or 3 years away from the fighting in Iraq being a major political issue. So, all right. Well, any other kind of last thoughts on these 3 episodes and what they had for us?
More Embo.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the bounty hunters. I love their stories. I love Cad Bane. I love Hondo. I want to see more of like all these individual ones and where they're all going.
And like less out of order sequencing, or like tell us beforehand that you're gonna be in a different period of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because they reference at one point when talking about Admiral Admiral Thrash. Trench. I can't even remember it. Admiral Trench. They reference that that everyone thought he was dead because he got vaporized. And so this feels particularly weird because we have seen him almost die in a different episode, but he's still here. But but in this, he's also already almost died off screen. It just, none of it makes any sense.
What episode do we see him almost die in? That's like way later, right?
I thought the episode that where he has all the cybernetics, doesn't he like almost die in that one?
Yeah, but that's the final season of Clone Wars.
No, I mean the episode we have seen him on. You and I, the three of us, have seen him on screen, haven't we?
No, this is his first appearance.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, you're probably just getting confused because you did the last season of Clone Wars.
Oh, that's right. He's in that too.
Right?
Okay.
That may that's where he comes back again with his cybernetics and all that stuff.
Okay, so this isn't quite as bad as I thought, but still a little bad.
So he's a spider, which means he's walking on 2 legs and then has 6 arms, right?
He's walking on 4 legs, I think. Like two on either side. And then has 4 arms. I could be wrong.
I was just thinking, like, what if he's Admiral Trench because he's 3 children in a trench coat?
I think this episode has now jumped the shark, and so I will start our wrap up. Well, fans, let us know. Do you think that the Admiral is 3 children in a trench, or perhaps 3 other bugs in a trench? Let us know. Tell whatever you think about all these episodes. We will now be regularly checking the emails. So I promise we will let you know. We will promise to respond to it. Also, though, we're going to probably, we'll keep doing like 3 or 4 episodes at a time. So if you want to look ahead and, either remember or watch some of the next episodes and then write into us with some thoughts you want us to discuss about those episodes, definitely please do that. We'd love to hear from you. Hope you're also checking out the rewatch of the movies that's going on the other part of this, as well as my other podcast, Superhero Ethics, as well as pretty much just everything that's happening right now on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network. It's great stuff for geeks. There's deep dives into Marvel, the DC Universe, Star Wars, Star Trek. I have just started a series of episodes that will probably have already gone live by the time this episode goes up on the newly launched PandaVision, which is going to be kind of about TV shows that don't fit into larger universes but fit genre. We're right now talking about the TV show The Boys. We're rewatching season 1, and season 2 has been announced. Will be coming out in September, so we're hoping to get ready for that, and we'll definitely be talking about that new season. We'll probably also be talking about Umbrella Academy pretty soon, which also comes out in late July, so look forward to that. Riki and Sara, thank you guys so much for being part of this. To all our fans, thank you so much. Find us on email, Facebook, Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.